So, Minion, you own a hammerhead. Why didn't you just CC your caterpillar into a hammerhead? You could have had some other money. You could have bought some other ships with that. Why did you keep the caterpillar? Well, because that's not how piracy is going to go. Let me tell you what's going to happen in the future. So right now, in the PU, you have Jumptown, and you have the incessant turf war over Jumptown because it's one of the best trade goods right now in terms of profitability. Widow, and there's a lot of people trying to get in there and trying to make money off of it, and so this has become kind of the pirate turf war. And certainly there are other players outside of those who would say that they're pirates who are trying to get in there and make that money because it's one of the few workable trade routes right now, or one of the few truly profitable trade routes. The rest are very mundane and very uninteresting, and I think that gameplay is kind of, some people are kind of looking at that and saying, oh, I'll just be a trader, and then they're like, this is kind of not all that exciting, whereas Jumptown tends to add a little spice, a little flavor to that. And when you look at piracy right now, it's very much in its embryonic stage. It's very difficult to kind of look at that embryo and say, I know what that's going to become. But in the future, there's going to be two technologies that come into the game. One being tractor beams, the other one being NPC haulers, which are going to become a part of the game at some point in the future, hopefully sooner rather than later, but it is what it is. When these two technologies come into the game, it is going to transform piracy. All of a sudden, where Jumptown was the main focus of activity, it's going to move away from Jumptown. It's going to go to places like Shubin. It's going to go to places like Arcorp. It's going to go to places like Kudrior and Deacons. It's going to evolve beyond those places because people are going to start to go, now I don't have to pay for any of the cargo. Now Widow is not an attractive commodity anymore. Now it's, once again, medical supplies, it's ores, it's raw materials, because it doesn't take long to see when you're going on the forums or you're going on Reddit and people are saying, oh, I can squeeze $1 million worth of goods onto my caterpillar. I can squeeze 100,000 onto my cutlass. It doesn't take that much of a leap of logic to say, what if I didn't pay for those goods in the first place? And all of a sudden, piracy starts to become a little bit more attractive. Add into the fact that you're going to have NPC haulers running to and fro, filled with cargo, and it becomes even more attractive still, because there might be people who are on the fence about piracy, who want to enjoy the game, who want to play the game, but don't want to impact other players. But now all of a sudden you're impacting an NPC, and they're like, well, I can be okay with that. Now I've got tractor beams, now I've got NPC haulers, and now I've got a cutlass, and it's very easy to see with a little bit of coordination and a good team. You might even be able to get away with it scot-free. What happens if you have a member of your team that shuts down the local communication satellite, maybe flies up to it in a stealth ship like a Saber or a Hornet Ghost, and then he EVAs over outside of its range, very carefully works his way over, and then places himself in that satellite and gets ready to shut it down? What if you have someone along with a Herald that can block distress transmissions? All of a sudden things start to get a little bit more interesting, because now that cutlass, that caterpillar with their tractor beams, stripping all that cargo off of that NPC hauler, is now a viable form of gameplay. That's now something that you can do. That's something that exists. And so, whereas somebody who was trading before, knows that the profit margins are kind of not all that great, what if you don't have to pay for them in the first place now becomes a reality. And you're going to start to see pirates going and taking ships like caterpillars and cutlasses, and they're going to be staking out near areas like Deacons, waiting for those NPC haulers to go, kind of come out of warp or move into the atmosphere where it might be more difficult for them to handle, or just getting out of the atmosphere and getting ready to quantum away, and they're going to start getting snagged and hit by players in pirate ships. You're going to start to see things like Buccaneers running distortion weapons to prevent them from spooling their quantum drive, to prevent them from getting away. And you're going to start to see, ships getting disabled rather than destroyed. You're going to start seeing people focusing more on blowing the engine pods off. And so you're going to look at weapon systems that are a lot more accurate, a lot more impactful on ship systems like that. That's the way things are going to go. And you're going to start seeing a lot more people using ships like Cutlasses and Caterpillars. Cutlasses especially because they're so cheap. And they're going to be using those to strip these NPC haulers. And so something like a Caterpillar, which kind of seems like a very mundane ship currently, is probably going to move into one of the more highly prized ships, because $1 million worth of cargo trading on a Caterpillar, sure, building up to that, it's going to take a long time. But what happens if you can stack $1 million of cargo on it without having to pay for it initially, right? A ship like the Hammerhead certainly has its place and has its value, but so does a ship like the Reclaimer. So does a ship like a Caterpillar. And depending on how sophisticated things are and how ambitious you're feeling, you may need a different ship for a different application, depending on who you have around you at the time and what you feel like taking on. A different ship might be the most useful in that situation. Certainly a Hammerhead would be really great at taking down the shields of a very large cargo hauler, but at the same time, its cargo capacity leaves something to be desired. I mean, it doesn't even have the same cargo capacity that a Cutlass does. And that's where something like, let's say, a Caterpillar might come, more in handy. Or even something, say, like a Reclaimer might come more in handy, where you can actually get more value out of that take by taking the ship itself and taking its components and selling those on. And certainly you've seen the price of components reflected in game as well. So I think that certainly, kind of going all in on the Hammerhead does have its place. I don't think that it's going to be something that's as broadly applicable as something like a Caterpillar is going to be, depending on who's online and what's available in terms of targets, whereas something like the Caterpillar is probably going to be a lot more attractive. And certainly ships like the Cutlass and the Herald are going to see a lot more interest in the pirate community, more so than now, once they kind of fully realize their potential, once these systems are brought into the game and they're able to really truly, exercise that potential. So I think that once tractor beams and once NPC haulers come into the game, you're going to see an explosion in piracy in game. You really are. And I think a lot of it is going to be directed at NPCs. I think that they're going to be on the receiving end of most of it. And there's going to be a lot of players who are probably sitting on the fence about things like this, who are going to go like, oh, I don't want to be a dick. I don't want to mess up other people's days, but NPCs, sure, I'll attack NPCs. I mean, I do it all the time. I attack Vanduul. One is the same as the other. I mean, it's not really another person, so I don't have to worry about her, hurting someone else's feelings. Why not? Especially if I get a little bit more coordinated and a little bit more organized in how I go about it, and I get a group together, maybe I can even avoid the legal repercussions. And generally that type of gameplay, when you kind of add a few extra layers to it, that becomes more fun. It becomes more interesting, more immersive when you're coordinating on that level. And especially when everything is going right. I mean, it's true of many massively multiplayer online games, completely independent of the format of that game, whether you're using a sword and board or whether you're using blasters and missiles. When you kind of get to that layer of fun coordination within a group that increases profitability, it becomes a lot more attractive. And I think that there's going to be a lot of players who are sitting on the fence about the whole piracy thing, who are going to start going, no. I want to get into that because I know that the profit margins in trading are kind of shitty. But if I don't have to pay for it in the first place, that's kind of fun. And you know what? If I don't hurt anybody's feelings along the way, so much the better. So as great as the Hammerhead is, and as much potential as it may have, truthfully, in the end, I think in Star Citizen, when it comes to piracy, the bread and butter really is going to be the Cutlass and the Caterpillar, and also the Herald as well. And when it comes to the Herald and the Cutlass, because they're so attractively priced, and the Cutlass, it's got that tractor beam. A lot of people forget that the Cutlass has a tractor beam because it's a feature that has never really been kind of implemented into the game, though it's frequently discussed. It's a feature that we really don't need right now, but once it comes into play, its impact on gameplay is going to be huge. And with the Cutlass having all of that, it makes it a very attractive ship, especially for pirates. So it's one of those ships I don't think that you can very easily give up. The Hammerhead's always going to have a place, and it's always going to have a certain amount of potential, but day in, day out, you're going to see the Caterpillars and the Cutlasses getting more usage. Now, the truth is that in the current roadmap, that's where the bad news is, right? Because tractor beams aren't on there, at least not that I've seen. And I've recently checked it again. Salvage holds a little potential in this area. We've discussed it a little bit, and possibly with the Vulture getting bumped up, if that does in fact happen, that could make things a little bit more interesting. But really, the things that you got to kind of look out for are NPC haulers, tractor beams. Those are the two big ones. When that stuff happens, that's when you're going to see this thing change, and that's when you're going to see Jumptown kind of just turn into a boring backwater again. And the real money and the real action is going to be out there and taking down these NPC haulers. That's when things are going to get exciting. Anyways, that is the show for today, and that is my thoughts on things to come. Hopefully sooner rather than later. CIG, if you're watching, tractor beams, NPC haulers, please. Anyways, I hope you enjoyed the show. Thanks for watching.
Thank you for watching. So if you want to keep up with the latest and greatest in Star Citizen and Squadron 42's development, please follow us on our social media channels. See you soon.